Okay, so today we're diving into a story that honestly has it all. We're talking about mind-boggling amounts of money, a tiny little office in Queens, the Russian mob, and a scandal so massive it completely rewrote the rules for global finance. This is the story of the Benex Scandal, and it all kicks off with a number that's just hard to even wrap your head around.
So, at the very heart of this whole thing is $7 billion. And this wasn't some accounting error or a minor slip-up. No, this was a massive, gushing pipeline of dirty money, enough to shake an entire country, all flowing through one of America's oldest, most respected banks.
And here's where it gets kinda wild. The end of the line for this $7 billion pipeline, it wasn't some gleaming Wall Street tower. It was right here, a small one-room office in Queens. I mean, the contrast between that insane amount of cash and this totally ordinary little office is your first big clue that something is very, very wrong here.
Which, leads us to the one question that hangs over this entire story. How does this even happen? How does a pillar of American finance, like the Bank of New York, basically turn into a laundromat for a new generation of Russian oligarchs and organized crime?
To get that, we first have to look at how this huge secret was even found out. Because, spoiler alert, the people who were supposed to be watching, they weren't. What's just incredible here is the sheer institutional failure. Get this. The Bank of New York, the place where it was all going down, they saw absolutely nothing. Their internal audits, their compliance teams, completely blind to it. The alarm bells were actually rung by two groups on the outside. British police, who were looking into a Russian mob boss named Semion Mogilevich, and another bank in New York that noticed all this weird activity and filed a report. The threat was spotted by literally everyone except the bank at the center of it all.
So if the bank didn't see it, how is this thing able to run in plain sight? Well, to answer that, we have to look at the mechanics of how they pulled this off.
The press nicknamed the scheme Bonnie and Clyde, a play on the bank's name and the husband and wife team that ran it. Lucy Edwards was a vice president at the Bank of New York in London. Her husband, Peter Berlin, was a Russian emigre in New York. And what they built together was, in its own way, kind of genius.
And the whole process was just shockingly simple. Step 1, Lucy Edwards uses her position as a VP to open up an account for her husband's shell company, Benex. Step 2, and this is the absolute key, the bank hands over its own special wire transfer software to that little office in Queens. This software let them shoot money around the world with no paper trail, which leads to step 3. The shell company basically becomes its own private, unregulated bank, firing off thousands of wires a day for clients in Russia with zero oversight.
And the scale was just off the charts. In just a year and a half, you're looking at over 8,000 transactions, worth more than $4 billion, all flowing through this one account. So why didn't the bank notice? Well, because that Benex account became the single most profitable account in the entire branch. It seems they were just making way too much money to bother asking any questions.
But Edwards and Berlin weren't working in a vacuum. They were just the people running the pipes. Those pipes served a much larger and way more powerful network of players back in Russia.
The reach of this whole conspiracy was just incredible. Yeah, you had the operators, Edwards and Berlin, and you had their boss, a senior VP named Natasha Kogalovsky, who later claimed she was just a scapegoat. But then you zoom out and look at their clients, guys like Alexander Mamut, an oligarch who was part of President Boris Yeltsin's inner circle. And then, at the top, Semion Mogilevich, the so-called boss of all bosses of the Russian mob. This wasn't some rogue employee. Benex was a full-service financial pipeline for the most powerful and dangerous people in Russia.
And this quote really just nails the whole atmosphere in Russia in the 1990s. The lines we usually see between business, government, and crime, they just weren't there. It had all melted together into this one single elite whose main goal was just to strip the country of its assets. And the Bank of New York, it was their getaway car.
And this plunder, it had a real price. This wasn't some victimless financial game. That $7 billion that fled Russia had a devastating real-world human cost.
See, this money was stolen from the state. It was money that should have gone to pay for pensions for the elderly, salaries for doctors and teachers, and just basic services for a population that was going through a total economic nightmare, mass unemployment, and a catastrophic drop in their standard of living.
And nothing shows the betrayal better than this timeline right here. In July of '98, the IMF sends Russia a nearly $5 billion emergency loan to save the economy. 1 month later, Russia defaults anyway. And what happens immediately after? A huge surge of over $4 billion, almost the exact same amount as the loan, gushes out of the country through the Benex pipeline. The implication is pretty clear. The elite used that international bailout money as their chance to cash out and get their own fortunes out of the country before it all fell apart.
So with a crime this big, touching on the global economy and organized crime, you'd think the punishment would be just as epic. But the real legacy of this scandal, you're not going to find it in a courtroom.
I mean, just look at the outcome. The crime, laundering $7 billion, helping to loot an entire country. The punishment? For the operators, Lucy Edwards and Peter Berlin, they got 6 months of house arrest. For the Bank of New York, a $38 million fine. For a crime of this scale, the consequences were just shockingly light.
And that's because the real, lasting impact of the Benex scandal wasn't the tiny fines or the light sentences. It was the absolute shock it sent through the system, a shock that forced a complete overhaul of financial laws all around the world.
This scandal led directly to what you could pretty much call the Benex Bill, which is Title III of the USA PATRIOT Act. Every major part of it is a direct fix for something that went wrong in this case. The bank didn't know its customer. Now we have mandatory Know Your Customer, or KYC rules. The bank just blindly trusted a foreign bank. Now we have enhanced due diligence. The bank let a shell company move money on behalf of other Russian banks. The law now goes after exactly that. This one scandal basically ended the age of just assuming everyone could be trusted in global finance.
And the result is the world we all live in now. A massive, multi-trillion-dollar global compliance industry was pretty much born from the ashes of this one scandal. Almost every international transaction you make today is touched by rules that were written because of that tiny little office in Queens. So the final question is pretty simple. After creating this whole giant new system to stop the next Benex, was it enough?